Hey, so the other day I was posting on Twitter about DARE, which, if you don't know, DARE is this program they make kids go through to keep kids off drugs. It's kind of a joke, I'll be honest. I'm really opposed to it. I'm not a very big, legalize everything person. I just don't care. But DARE, I just didn't see it do anything for anyone I knew. Excuse me. And it got me to thinking about other things, like my science class in seventh grade, because that's when we had DARE. Because every seventh grader had to go through it, but they had to find a class we all took because that was the first year you had elective courses, and so I guess I just chose science because in seventh grade, science is basically a rehash of everything you've learned until that point. And almost every science teacher at my junior high was a coach. I can think of maybe three teachers who taught science that were not also coaches. And I didn't. I think I had two. I had one in seventh and one in ninth grade because in our district, the ninth grade you're technically high school, but you're still at the middle school. Um, yeah, I had seventh grade. I had a coach for science, and in ninth grade I had a coach for science. Eighth grade I had a teacher named Mr. Carrington, who I have not thought of since I was 14. Um, but yeah, and I've talked to people about it. Most people say, "Oh, you have a coach for a science class." What a joke it is! It's not very smart. But most of the coaches I had were actually really knowledgeable, knew what they were doing. Um, Especially my ninth grade coach. I didn't like him, but because it was like I'd had him in football and in athletics, and it was interesting because he was such a different person in the classroom. And on the field, he was the "I will scream at you until I am red" coach, the angriest human being there. And you get him in a classroom, and he was this little boring milk toast man who every day would put a Far Side comic on the projector for us to read, and then he would explain it and make it as unfunny as he possibly could. But he was a good teacher, and he did know a lot about biology. So he was. I think that was actually what his field of study was originally. My seventh grade coach was the one I was thinking about the most because DARE. So I looked him up online and found out he's still coaching, but at a high school as a head coach now, which doesn't surprise me because he was really good as a football coach. And I considered emailing him, but I didn't because that was late '80s, early '90s. Probably doesn't remember me because I was not really talkative in his class or even in sports. But also every time I think about this man, I think about one weird incident. And before I explain that incident, I want to try to humanize him because he was not a bad person. Not even a crazy person for the most part. He was really good in football. He was a really smart science teacher, and he did know what he's doing. Like, and the cool thing is, if you had him in athletics and in science, he would quiz you in athletics. Like, you'd be doing weightlifting, he'd walk by and scream, "What's the difference between a phenotype and a genotype?" And you have to answer him, or you'd get a lap. And he was pretty laid back. He had been a hippie, apparently, and that was kind of hard for most of us to believe because he looked like a gorilla, basically. And when you saw him coaching, he was so aggressive and angry. But he was also a very, very devoted Christian. I guess worked in a music ministry as well. And he didn't bring it up. That was something that he generally kept quiet. You know, most people actually in my school district, religion was kind of kept out of the classroom, which people are surprised when they hear that because it's Texas. But I can only think of a couple teachers who ever brought their faith into the classroom for reasons that weren't related to like a discussion we were having. And he didn't do that. He did his best to keep his views out, and I respected that. And that's why it's kind of unfortunate that every time I think of this man, I think of this one incident, In October of 1988, it's Spirit Week, which is basically the week of homecoming. And every day is a different themed day. Kids are supposed to come dressed up as that theme. Like, you would have, oh no, I'm trying to remember, like 70s day, people come dressed in disco. Of course, one of the days is always Halloween, because homecoming is almost always the week of Halloween. But one day that week we had was Hippie Day. And you would see this normally angry, stalking man walking around campus dressed in the clothes he wore in the 60s, because he could still fit in them. Which basically meant he was always a huge, barrel-chested, scary individual. But, talking hippie slang, and it was kind of funny, because he was smiling. He was actually pretty happy. He gave me some crap, because he saw me that morning, because I wasn't dressed up. I never dressed up for those things. I didn't care. But, he was actually really nice, and we're walking to his class, and he's talking about, yeah, I was really big in the hippie movement. I mean, there are a lot of things I didn't agree with because of my faith, but I was really active. It was kind of nice. It humanized him a little bit, because I had always seen him as a kind of this barking individual of science, facts, and commands on a football field, and then we go into class, and I sit down, and he's all in a good mood. He's, throwing out his little hippie slang, and he turns the chalkboard, and every amount of joy melted from his face. He just lost it. Who did this? Who the hell did this? And just yelling and hitting the chalkboard, and I had never seen him earnestly angry. So it was kind of stunning. So it took me a while to actually take my eyes off him and look at what he's mad at. Someone had drawn a peace sign on the board, and he couldn't handle it. He was so upset. He's like, you know what this is? This isn't a sign of peace. This is a pentagram. And goes into this big 10-minute rant about pentagrams and the connection to hell they open, and how someone has just invited Satan into our classroom. 10 minutes. Not a word from any student. Just straight staring. And all I can think is, this is the man the state of Texas pays to teach me about science. And he's upset that someone with a piece of chalk opened a portal to hell in our classroom. That was the exact moment I understood why people make fun of the Bible Belt. And it was the exact moment I swore to myself one day I would not live in Texas.